Happy Friday and happy Fridays with Fidelman. I'm Cheryl Fidelman, life coach, trauma healer, and writer. And I believe that codependence is the most obvious way that we demonstrate our unhealed trauma in relationship with others, and most importantly, our relationship with ourselves. Again, happy Friday. It's the last Friday in March 2020, and today's topic on Fridays with Fidelman is sovereignty and independence. And I'm going to throw in some ideas also that I have on context and our unconscious loyalty to context. So sovereignty is the antithesis, the opposite, the sort of polar opposite of codependence, right? Sovereignty, independence, the other side of codependence, where, it's sort of the North Star for a lot of codependents who are in recovery. The North Star is to be a sovereign being no matter what relationship you're in. And not just a sovereign being in relationship with others, a sovereign being in relationship with yourself and in relationship with your trauma. So that your trauma and your default identity, also known as your traumatic identity, also known as your default psychology, as I refer to them in my own work, that as a sovereign being, that we are not taken down by our own automatic traumatic thoughts that are run by our default psychology, that we actually have a stronger part of ourselves, which in my work I call our true nature, so that we're living more from our true nature, which doesn't necessarily mean that our traumatic automatic thoughts are not there anymore, but that our true nature can notice them, objectify them, and actually have a louder voice. So so I'm talking about sovereignty in relationship to others and in relationship to ourselves. And in relationship to others, it would be that that our nervous system isn't consistently and constantly reorganizing ourselves to survive pretty much any interaction with another being. Certainly codependence gets triggered more in intimate relationships, family relationships, and job relationships. And inside of sovereignty, which is the other side of the coin, that we remain in regulation and we remain having our own independent thoughts, our own independent creative thoughts in reaction to another person. That our thoughts and our actions and our languaging and the things that we're saying and the dynamics of relationships that we create aren't in order to not be abandoned. They're not in order to survive the moment. And there's so many things that we do in order to not be abandoned, in order to survive the moment, which I've talked about, so much when I've talked about codependence in my videos, repression, either repression or the opposite of that, which would be overly expressing the need to be needed, the want to be wanted, and the need to prove oneself. So that in sovereignty, we don't go into any of those things. That we actually allow another to be a sovereign being, having no impression on the way we are going to handle a situation, that we are free and independent in the way that we are speaking. Now, of course, that doesn't mean speaking, thinking, being, moving. I mean, our codependence goes way beyond our languaging. It goes also into the level of eye contact that we have, the way our jaw, our nervous system is really, for a lot of us, trapped in the anxiety in our nervous system plays a huge role in how we operate our jaw and how we operate our bodies. And when I'm talking about sovereignty, being a free being and being free to express and communicate what we want to say in any moment, not directed by our survival techniques, our unconscious survival techniques. That's not to say that we become inappropriate or that we grab or steal the permission to say whatever we want to say, however we want to say it, because that also would be a survival technique. So then what does it mean then, right, to be a sovereign being? It would mean to not be pulled out of your experience by another person. That you're honoring your experience and you're honoring that somebody else is having an experience, and the two experiences don't have to be connected. You're not fighting for connection. You're not fighting for you're not fighting for connection. You're not repressing in order to avoid being abandoned. That you're fully responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And that nobody's behavior can have you ignore your experience. Because oftentimes in codependence, it looks as if the other person is doing something to you that has you ignore your experience. That's another level of sovereignty, where we can come to the terms with nobody's actually doing anything to us that has us ignore or reshape or reframe our experience. That is our nervous system working to survive. Another way our nervous system is working to survive is that it is having us be seen in a particular way. Like if there's a way that you want to be seen by people, there's a way you want people to interpret you, there's ways in which you don't want them to see you as, like you don't want them to see you as a certain kind of person, or you don't want them to interpret you in a certain kind of way. And so we act the way we feel like we want to be perceived. So we're oftentimes manipulating how our behavior lands with another person, without even asking them, like, hey, how did my behavior just land for you? Because that's really the way you can find out, is to actually ask. But we actually repress our curiosity and then just manipulate our being in the hopes that we land in a particular way in somebody else's sight or listening of us or interpretation of us. And that is not sovereignty, right? That is codependence. When we are hoping and reorganizing ourselves, we're hoping that somebody sees us in a particular way. We're reorganizing ourselves in the way we want to be seen, instead of being regulated, maskless, and actually being actually seen. Actually seen for who you are and who you're not. So sovereignty is also, it sounds great, right? Oh, sovereign, independent, I can just be the way that I want to be, and I don't have to conform, and I don't have to, be in relationships that I don't want to be in, or I can be, just not so affected by other people's behaviors. I can make my own decisions and choices, not depending on what other people are going to think about those decisions or choices. It sounds like a great idea, and on many levels it is a great idea. And it's a much more vulnerable place to be. It's a much more vulnerable place to be when you are allowing yourself to be seen for who you are and who you're not. And that is pure sovereignty. It's sovereignty and independence, the antithesis of codependence, which I've said many times, the want to be wanted, the need to be needed, and or the need to prove oneself. So in sovereignty, there is a disappearance of all three of those things, especially the need to prove oneself. Just disappeared. It's not there. Nothing to prove. Pure sovereignty, pure independence. There's absolutely nothing to prove. You are what you are and who you are and who you're not, and so is everybody else. So it's not just a more vulnerable place to be over here with ourselves, but it's a more vulnerable place to be with other people, because you're actually finding yourself accepting people for who they are and who they're not. And you have a willingness to fully see people for who they are and who they're not, which actually helps shed more dysfunctional relationships. It helps you release dysfunctional relationships. Because in codependence, oftentimes we tend to not want to see something about another person. We tend to see them the way that we want to see them, instead of for who they actually are. You know, people are in relationships for 5, 10, 20 years, and they go, man, I saw who they actually were in the first month, but I stayed anyway. And so so we tend to be in a relationship with not who actually somebody is, and then they're in relationship with us, and we are not being actually who we are. So it's two non-independent identities and personalities. And so another an additional way to access sovereignty and access being vulnerable, being who you are, being who you're not, is being in a process of knowing who you are and knowing who you're not. You know, not only do we tend to not see other people for who they really are and who they are really not, and we tend to, see other people, especially people who are in intimate relationships with, we tend to, I don't know if idolize is the right word, but we tend to only see what we want to see and only be in relationship with the part of them that we want to be in relationship with. And we do the same thing with ourselves. There's some idealized version of ourselves that we think that we are. And it's so many levels of it. You may think you're a super nice person, or you might want to curse if you're super nice and super outgoing and super giving, and that you got things handled. You may want to occur as the funny one or the entertaining one, or you're the one who has your shit together, or some people want to occur as if they don't have their shit together, because their relationships depend on them not having their shit together. So there's so many ways in which we hold on to our identity. And so in our path to sovereignty, we want to be willing to let go of who we think we are and become intimately related with who we are, which also is a moving, I put out a video called Who Do You Think You Are? And I'm going to put that link down as well, because I think it adds to these thoughts. But because it's like, who do you think you are? And also having the depth and breadth and patience to embrace that you are a moving, evolving being consistently. And so is everybody else. That we're constantly morphing. And that's why I wanted to touch on context just a little bit at the end here, which is that the more we notice our unconscious loyalty to context, the more we can be adaptable and move and evolve at a quicker pace. And that may sound really wordy, and it probably does. And so what I mean by that, and I think this is a good time to bring up context, because it's, we're in this coronavirus pandemic, and there's such a specific context that's been dropped in our laps that we didn't have a choice, right? All of a sudden things changed, we're quarantined, we're at home, we don't know what our, how long it's gonna go, people's finances are shaky and unknown, and so, it's like, is this a time to create and reinvent yourself, right? So we can contextualize this any way that we want to contextualize this. Is this a time of hibernation to be continually future tripping and worrying what's going to happen? Is this a time to say, you know what? I'm going to incubate. This is like a homeschool term. Like, I'm going to homeschool myself. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to create something new. And then I'm going to come out of this 10 times better. I had some other thoughts that I wrote down about this. Oh, also, we're so loyal to context. I'm going to come back to the quarantine thing in a minute. For example, when people are married, and the context of their relationship is marriage, and so their nervous system will go, the context of this is marriage. I cannot be left or abandoned, so I'm going to repress and reframe all that I can in repress, reframe, contort all that I can in order to be in service of this context of marriage. Or people have a job that they're not happy with, and so their whole life is go to work, go home, go to work, go home, go to work, go home. Their whole life is in service to this one context, okay? This one paradigm, this one sort of, piece of reality. And the quarantine thing I wanted to come back to, which was like, what if we knew that the quarantine was going to be 45 days long? That's the context. Okay, guys, it's going to be 45 days long. It's going to end at X date. Then our current behavior and experience would be completely different. Or if the context was we were told about this a month ago, like, hey guys, in a month you're going to be off for 45 days, then this 45 days would be completely different. Right? We would probably have things planned. We probably would have created the 45 days to be a particular way. People would have had time to, do something different with their kids, or, create projects together during this quarantine time. If we knew about it in advance, or if we knew how long it was going to go. And now the context is we don't know how long it's going to go. This happened out of nowhere. We didn't have a choice. And so a lot of people are reacting to it the way they react to choice. The way they react to their freedom of choice, or thinking they have a choice or don't have a choice, or whether they're powerless or not. Instead of going, I'm going to create my own context. Whatever that is during this time. And I'm going to relate and react to this time period as if this is the context. It's reinvention time. It's recreation time. It's learn a new skill time. Whatever it is, create the context. And I think that codependence is an automatic context. Like, oh good, I'm dating someone new, let's be codependent, because that's what happens in dating. If you're with somebody that you think you want a future with, so you'll be a certain level of repressed because you think there's a future. Or if you're dating somebody where you think there's no future, you'll be another level of repressed because you're like, there's no future here. Why should I speak up? So, context is decisive. it will tell us how much we are going to express and how much we're not going to express, how much we're going to be worried and concerned, and how much we're not going to be worried and concerned. And the reason why I bring up context is because being a sovereign being means you create your own context. You bring context to conversation. You bring context to a relationship. You bring context to your job. You bring context to your relationship with yourself. You bring context to your mission and your purpose in life. It's all generated by you. That is sovereignty. So, how long have I been going on here? Okay. So, a couple of announcements. This week, this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm going to be doing my third masterclass in the Facebook group, and it's on sovereignty and independence. And so I did, last week, I did my first Trauma to Truth Masterclass, Part 1 on codependence, 3 days, the want to be wanted, the need to be needed, the need to prove oneself. This week was Trauma to Truth Masterclass Part 2, Procrastination, which was settling, nothing at stake, and death denial. This Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Trauma to Truth Masterclass Part 3, independence and sovereignty, in the 3 parts, which I kind of just went over, did a summary of: context, future, embrace, and resist. All right, everybody. If you want to participate in the masterclass or watch the recordings of the masterclass, please join the Trust Yourself Facebook group, which is in the email that you were sent above this video, and also below this video. I'm keeping them in the Facebook group so that I can just keep the recordings in one hub, and I'm growing that community. It's going so amazingly well in that community. Just a lot of, deep sharing and a lot of learning and growing, evolving and healing. Happy Friday. Have an awesome weekend. Happy healing. Life is now. And take immune boosters. Keep your immune system strong. Bye, everybody. I forgot to say that the master classes are free. And I'm just really excited to be just pumping out as much material as I possibly can during these times, being of contribution and just putting out free material. And also, if you're interested, I have some of my services that are free as well. And I'm happy to keep the healing going during this time of just avoiding infection. I want to keep the healing high. And I'm really, my heart is... I'm just getting so much out of being in service, being of service, and being in contribution. I'm a healer, and the healing must continue, especially in times of a global pandemic. All right, everybody, that's it. Bye.